Hi everyone, and welcome to our very first screencast on cells. Today we're going to be learning all about cells and cell organelles, and by the end of our 3 screencasts on this unit, you need to be able to describe all of the organelles and tell what all of their functions are and how they help the cell. Also, you'll have to describe how they work together to do certain jobs for the cell, and you'll have to recognize pictures, diagrams that have been drawn, and electron micrograph pictures of each of the different organelles. You want to be thinking as we go through this screencast of some good questions that you can come to class with. You should have watched this screencast before our review session on cells, and you want to come up with 3 hot questions. These might be questions that you already know the answers to. They might also be questions that you still have and are not understanding yet at the end of the screencast. A few interesting facts about cells before we get started. The biggest cells are motor neurons. They have to go all the way from your spinal cord to your toes, so they're quite long. All of your body, inside and out, is absolutely covered with bacteria, 32 million on every square inch. We are very much organisms that live with other organisms and help each other survive. You lose about 105 pounds of skin by the time you're 70 years of age, and that's because you shed and regrow your skin. You have about 1,000 new skins in your lifetime. It's kind of crazy to think about. The largest cell in the female body is the egg, and the smallest cell is in the male body as the sperm. It takes about 175 sperm cells to weigh as much as 1 egg. And your cells are constantly regenerating, making new cells, and that's because 300 million cells die in your body every minute. There's 2 types of cells. You would have learned this in Biology 12. There are prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Our prokaryotic cells are bacterial cells, so cells that don't have a nucleus. They were the very first cells to evolve, and they have ribosomes which help the nucleoid. The nucleoid is a structure in the middle of the prokaryote here, and it contains all of the DNA that helps the bacterial cell make proteins. We, on the other hand, have eukaryotic cells. Here's a prokaryotic cell. Eukaryotic cells are cells that have a true nucleus, and the nucleus is surrounded by a membrane, and so are most of the organelles. This is a bilayer membrane. It's got 2 layers of fats around the membrane, and we'll be talking about that more in a minute. They're about 1,000 times bigger than those prokaryotic cells we were looking at. Here's a typical picture of an animal cell. You'll see the mitochondria here, and the nucleus in the middle, the ER, the Golgi. You probably will recognize some of these things. The lysosomes, some of them might be new, the flagella. So we're going to be talking and learning about all of these things today. But you should understand that in the human body, which is what this class is all about, cells won't look as picture perfect as that drawing. Here, for example, is some skin cells. This part is at the edge of your skin. Those are dead skin cells that slough off when you rub your skin against something. And then as you get deeper down into the skin, you'll see these roundish shaped cells. These are called squamous cells, and they look similar to the picture that you saw. The cells in the digestive system, though, are a little different. See, here is a cell here with the nucleus, and these are the cells that help us to digest and absorb our food. In the female reproductive tract, you've got more of a rectangular shaped cell. Here's the nucleus and the cilia that comes off of that. You'll learn more about that when we talk about reproduction. If you took Biology 11 and learned about deep time, you'll know that the Earth formed about 4.5 billion years ago, until 1 billion years had passed that you had your first bacteria, your archaebacteria on life, your first prokaryotic cells, and then it took 2 billion years more before you got your first eukaryotes. And the belief is that prokaryotes started to live together in symbiosis like many plants and animals do now, and that created the first eukaryotic cells. The cell theory you've also learned about, so this is just a refresher. All things that are living are made of cells, which is one of the reasons we can't include viruses on that list of things that are living. The cell is the functional unit of life. It's cells that do the work inside your body for us, and all living cells come from cells that are pre-existing. One cell will get bigger, and then when it's reached a certain size and copied all of its organelles and nuclei, then it will split into two cells. We're going to start talking today in this screencast about the plasma cell membrane. This is the membrane that surrounds the cell. It's a dual layer, so it's got two layers. Sometimes you'll see it referred to as the phospholipid bilayer. Some people also call the plasma cell membrane as just the plasma membrane or the cell membrane. Plasma membrane is probably the best for our purposes. So let's talk about the cell. Here it is in our overall picture. So it is the membrane that encompasses the entire cell, and it's double layered. You'll see here that this is one phospholipid, and the reason we call it a bilayer is that you've got one layer of phospholipids with all the tails facing in, and then you've got another layer of phospholipids with all the tails facing the tails of the first layer. Okay, this is a universal structure. You see it in all living organisms, from bacteria to fungus to animals and plants. Many of the organelles, like the mitochondria and the Golgi, have a double layer just like this. When we're talking about the plasma membrane, we like to refer to the fluid mosaic model. This is an excellent picture of a fluid mosaic model. It shows you all of the different parts, from the proteins here and the glycoproteins here to the cytoskeleton and the cholesterol and the glycolipids and of course your phospholipids, and we're going to be talking about all of those next. The plasma membrane is selectively permeable. It decides or controls what can come in the cell and what can leave the cell. If you're really big, or if you have a positive or negative charge, or if you're polar, you can't go through that way. If you look at this little animation, you'll see that these guys must be small and not charged, something like oxygen or alcohol. Because these ones are charged, they're not going to be able to come in. Lots of things, if they're charged or too big, need a protein helper to move in or out of the cell. The reason we call the plasma membrane fluid is because these phospholipids move horizontally, and sometimes they even flip from one side to the other. And it's a double layer, as you can see in this next picture. This is an electron micrograph. This is a cell here, and this is a different cell here, and you'll see both of them have a double layered membrane. So let's talk about the parts. We're going to talk about the glycolipids first. Glycolipids are sugars that are attached to a lipid, a fat, and they act as receptors. They receive information from the body to help the cell decide what it's going to do. Glycoproteins have the same job. Again, it's a sugar. This time it's a sugar attached to a protein, and they also receive information. So what kind of information will they receive? They'll receive information from other cells. So this is how cells communicate with each other. They'll receive information from viruses and from bacteria in the outer world. They'll also receive information from hormones and enzymes, and also from your immune system, from antibodies. And this is how cells communicate with the world inside your body. You've also got proteins. So proteins and fats make up the most of your cell membrane. Proteins can either be integral, which means they go throughout the whole plasma membrane, or they can be peripheral, which means they just kind of sit on one edge, like these guys are doing. And basically they help bigger things, charged things, or polar things move in and out of the cell. Sometimes that's done with a channel, like a little tunnel. You can see in this one, that's called an ion channel. And sometimes that's done with a carrier protein, which will actually change its shape as things are moving through it. So you can see here the carrier protein, it's helping or assisting a molecule, probably a charged molecule, move into the cell. Cholesterol is another big part of your fluid mosaic model, and that's because cholesterol keeps the membrane from getting too fluid, and it also keeps the membrane from becoming solid when the body reaches room temperatures. Okay, here's cholesterol here. It's got a definitive 4-ring structure. The cytoskeleton is also very important because it acts as kind of the binding and it keeps the shape of the cell. So if the cell is like a rectangle in the female reproductive tract, the cytoskeleton will help it keep that shape. If you look inside the cell, there's more cytoskeleton. All of this is also cytoskeleton, and we'll talk a little bit later about what that does for the cell. So again, make sure you've come up with some hot questions all about the cell membrane, and that is the end of our first screencast.